There was no war cry, no impact tremor, no signature on auger arrays, just a single moment. And then 1,300 stars went silent. Whole sectors, entire trade routes, forge worlds, agri-worlds, shrine planets, disconnected, severed as if a god's hand had reached through the warp and drawn a line across the map of the Imperium. The reports were late. The silence wasn't noticed until the echoes failed to return. Vox relays pinged out their signals across Segmentum Pacificus, waiting on answers that never came. Fleet channels doubled their pings. Astropathic choirs strained until their minds bled, but the returns were always the same. Nothing, and not the kind of nothing born from jamming or solar interference or the usual warp corruption. This was a clean absence, a stillness that felt deliberate, controlled, absolute. The Administratum called it a communications lapse. The Navis Nobilitae, watching the Astronomican flicker and dim across the Noctis Obscurum, used darker words, diminuendo, collapse by tempo. Not a surge, not a scream, a pull. As if something in the Immaterium had begun to draw breath. By the third day, localized panic erupted across major subsector hubs. Merchant fleets refused to launch. Astropathic sanctums were barricaded from within. A broadcast from Karad Prime, one of the last before the sector went fully dark, carried only 3 words. We hear it. Those words were logged by 3 different monitoring stations on Stygimatus, verified, and then scrubbed by the Ordo Hereticus within the hour. No cause was ever filed. No record remains, except for one marginalia note in a secondary data loom. Astropaths requested summary termination. All refused to speak. Segmentum Command assumed another chaos incursion. The protocols were followed, probes launched, watch fleets dispatched, astropathic choirs were pushed to their limits. But no pattern emerged. No incursion zones, no cultist transmissions, no warp storms. Just a spreading stillness. Some began to speculate it was the Astronomican itself, failing, fragmenting, being unmade. Others whispered about a warp predator, something vast and slow, harvesting minds without leaving a trace. The Navis Nobilitae cited deviations in the Emperor's light across 5 subsectors, but the data made no sense, like shadows moving backwards through time. By the 10th day, the silence had earned a name, spoken quietly, without ceremony, behind locked blast doors. The Howling. Not because of what it sounded like, but because of what was heard. It had no name, until the screams gave it one. The Cacodominus. Even now, its title is whispered more than spoken, etched into inquisitorial archives in ink that resists transcription, because names have power. And this name, this word, broadcasts. It wasn't a demon, not in the formal, ritual-classified sense. The creature was real, physical. Something that could bleed, something that could die. It had a body, if you could call it that. Partial flesh, mechanical augmentation. Xenotech fused to neuro-organic lattice work. It wore no armor. It didn't need to. It was its own weapon. What emerged from the void wasn't a vessel, or a fleet, or a planet killer. It was a presence. The first confirmed sighting came from the recovered pick stream of a dead Black Templars strike cruiser. 7 seconds of degraded footage. A shadow behind static. No light, no eyes. Just a void-shaped outline. Standing still, surrounded by men screaming silently in their flak before their picked feeds imploded. The Ordo Xenos believed it to be the result of radical cybernetic evolution. A singular mind augmented past cohesion, capable of psychic output orders of magnitude beyond any sanctioned human psyker. The Ordo Hereticus called it something else, an instrument of apostasy, designed not to kill, but to overwrite. The Astronomican is the sole light of the Imperium. It pulses in the warp as a signal, as direction. Navigators steer by it. Vox channels stabilize around it. But the Cacodominus didn't block the Astronomican. It spoke louder. Imagine that. Something louder than the Emperor's will. A voice so bright, it scorched over the God Emperor's own. No sorcerer has ever done that. No demon prince. No warp storm, no psychic maelstrom. This wasn't noise, this was language. Coherent, layered, not a scream, but a command. And across 1,300 systems, they obeyed. The Cacodominus didn't burn planets. It didn't deploy armies. It spoke once, and the stars bent. No cult needed to be seeded. No heresy needed to be taught. Worship emerged spontaneously, like fire igniting from the air. Astropaths collapsed mid-message, whispering prayers to a god they had never heard before. Mechanicus priests began to chant in binary patterns they had no memory of learning. Imperial governors dissolved their own courts and walked alone into the desert, reciting coordinates into the void. This wasn't domination, it was infection by voice. And wherever that voice landed, it rewrote loyalty, sanity, and soul. Not even the Dreadblades were immune. 17 of them, massive warp-bound Chaos Knights who bowed to no master, knelt. What kind of mind does it take to subjugate chaos? What kind of will burn so clean that even madness bows? There are no full images of the Cacodominus. There are no recovered Vox recordings of its speech. But those who were near it, those who survived, describe it in fragments. It sounded like every voice I've ever loved. It felt like clarity. It asked nothing. It just was. The creature did not conquer. It made the universe remember that there are frequencies older than thought, and that if you hear them, you belong to them. The Imperium has always feared the warp, not because it's unknowable, but because it's alive, chaotic, hungry, reflexive. It listens only to itself, echoes back pain, feeds on memory, mutates desire. Ships pass through it on prayer and psi wards. Psykers draw from it with trembling reverence, always at risk of drawing too much. But in M34, for the first and only time, the warp listened. And then it obeyed. Across the 1,300 systems touched by the Howling, the pattern emerged. Not chaos, not madness, not demonic incursion. Harmony. A calm so unnatural it bled through reality. Shrines were built. Processions walked silently through hives. Administratum tithes were filed in absolute synchrony, as if every cogitator had received the same unspoken code. And at the heart of it all, one voice, one tone, entire planets acted in psychic rhythm. Astropaths stopped resisting. Some willingly allowed their minds to be tethered, chained into living psychic relay networks, human resonators, choirs of flesh, thousands linked in harmonic submission to the mind broadcasting over everything, the Cacodominus. It didn't send commands, it didn't need to, because once heard, it rewrote the will. There are void logs from Mechanicus expeditions attempting to breach the outer edges of the affected sectors. One transcript from Explorator Vessel Reductor Amnion reads, "No resistance encountered, everything is working, too well, all systems fully optimized, zero deviation, even the flora is aligned to grid." When the tech priests attempted to interface with local data looms, they found entire planetary machine spirits cooperating, not resisting. And when they tried to purge or reboot, the machines overrode them, calmly stating, "Order input already received, directive satisfied." Those tech priests never returned, not because they were killed, but because they stayed. Even the Dreadblades, those lone Chaos Knights damned to wander without a throne mechanicum, found themselves gravitating toward the psychic tide. 17 fell under the Cacodominus's thrall. 17 abominations of corrupted steel and warp-bound rage. Pacified. They didn't resist, they revered. The Ordo Malleus scrambled to explain this anomaly. Some claimed the Cacodominus was a warp god in larval form, something neither demon nor mortal, but ascending. Others theorized that its voice wasn't sound at all, but a kind of linguistic virus, a mimetic payload engineered to enslave psychic cognition across species and dimensions. But none of the theories could explain the scale. 17 subsectors, aligned, doctrinally, psychically, administratively. All records, all messages, all rituals shaped into one repeating structure. Heard, obeyed, harmonized. This wasn't cult behavior, this was programming. And the warp, fickle, turbulent, ungovernable, wasn't resisting. It was assisting. The Black Templars do not retreat. They do not entreat. They do not ask questions of the warp. They kill it. When the Howling began, they didn't wait for an explanation. They launched a crusade. No librarians to divine the threat. No psychic anchors to stabilize the path. No warp readers to guide them. Just fury. Just faith. Just blades, bolters, and the hatred of witchcraft burned into their gene seed since the day Sigismund first knelt before the Emperor. It wasn't strategy. It was vengeance. Their fleet entered silence on the 43rd day after the initial blackout. No communications left the strike force after that point. What we know comes from the remnants. Charred fragments of Vox logs recovered from wreckage, burn-scarred helmets found on drifting bulkheads, and Autosaint audio reels that continued to record long after their bearers were dead. We know this. They made contact. They reached the center of the storm, and they found it. A single recovered fragment from a suit of Terminator armor found embedded in a half-vitrified ferrocrete wall on Neogeddon 9 contains a 5-second recording. A voice, ragged with pain but clear. We have reached the mouth. The machine sings. We do not understand, but the Emperor wills it be silenced. That's the last clear statement from the Black Templars regarding the Cacodominus. Everything after is redacted, not sealed, not classified, burned. Theories swirl. Some believe the chapter sent in only sword brethren to preserve psychic purity. Others whisper that the initial detachment included sanctioned psykers, and that all of them died, not in battle, but in rapture. That the Cacodominus didn't kill them, it converted them. If that is true, then the shame was absolute. For a chapter built on the Blade's purity, to see their own minds turn to quire would be intolerable. It would explain why they have never sanctioned a librarian since. To this day, the Black Templars remain unique among the Adeptus Astartes. No librarius, no sanctioned psykers, no room for the warp to speak. They reject all psychic aid. Even navigators and astropaths aboard their vessels are kept sealed, warded, restrained in cold silence. Some say it is doctrinal, others tactical. But some, especially within the Ordo Hereticus, believe it's a scar. Because when they slew the Cacodominus, the warp didn't just echo. It screamed. No one alive knows what the Cacodominus sounded like at the moment of its death. But everyone in the warp heard it. It wasn't a scream in the way we understand noise. There were no sound waves, no vibration. It was psychic, a soul quake that surged outward in every direction, bending the Imperium into a shape it had never taken before and has never taken since. Billions died in the moment. Not in combat, not in fire, in resonance collapse. Astropaths across the Imperium, those linked to the skein of psychic communication, those tuned even slightly to the Astronomican, burst into flame, spasmed into rigor, or simply ceased. Their minds extinguished like lumens going dark. On Balthus Secundus, every member of the local Astra telepathic choir died simultaneously, mid-transmission. Their final message came through incomplete, unfinished, but unmistakable. He is not. And then, nothing. The Astronomican itself stuttered. Navigators reported momentary blindness. Warp travel became impossible across multiple sectors. Some ships misjumped by centuries. Others never emerged. In those regions where silence fell hardest, ancient forge worlds devolved into ritual-driven savagery. Shrine worlds, unable to receive ecclesiastical sanction, drifted into new theologies. Subsectors ceased functioning entirely, economically, politically, spiritually. They call it the silent collapse. In the years that followed, some estimated the true cost, over 1 billion astropaths dead, more than 20 million ships lost, 100 subsectors functionally abandoned. But those numbers are speculative. Nobody truly knows, because the scream didn't just kill. It distorted, Vox records corrupted, time indexes scrambled, machine spirits corrupted across cogitator networks. Even the noosphere, where information is stored in static sanctity by the Mechanicus, suffered cascading memory failures. Dozens of data looms report identical recursive fragments. Heard, obeyed, harmonized, heard, obeyed, harmonize, then corruption. This wasn't just death. This was echo. The warp kept the scream. And in some places, even today, it replays. It should have been dust. Ceramite shattered. Flesh atomized. Psi resonance dispersed. That's what should have happened when the Cacodominus died, when the Black Templars ended it in blood and fury. But something remained. A skull. Not bone. Not fully. Not metal either. What was recovered, if we believe it was recovered, was something in between. Dense, psychoreactive composite, laced with circuitry and veins of unknown origin, wrapped around what appeared to be a core of petrified grey tissue. The artifact was taken into Ordo Malleus custody under Designatus Reliquary Null 733 Xiphon. It now exists beneath 23 layers of sanction, cryptographically sealed within a null vault chamber on an unnamed moon in Segmentum Solar. But the seal is not stable. Every 57 hours, the skull emits a pulse. It cannot be heard, it cannot be recorded. But Astropaths dream of it. They wake screaming, clutching their heads, whispering words they do not understand, fragments of a dialect that precedes Gothic, preceding even Dark Age Logi High Cant. Scrambled messages, nonsense strings. But when run through low-level machine translation cores, the pattern re-emerges. Heard, obeyed, harmonized. The same refrain, still broadcasting. There are reports, none confirmed, of lower Ordo Hereticus members descending into madness while studying proximity-picked scans of the skull. Not the real thing, just the scans. The Adeptus Mechanicus, for their part, have made 3 requests for custodial transfer, all denied. The Magi believe the skull houses an active data gestalt, not sentient, but repeating. A signal loop embedded so deeply into its structure that it no longer needs power. It lives off memory, off interpretation. And it's not just the skull. In affected sectors, ships have reported micro-warp tremors with no source. Choirs detect psychic friction around inert objects, containers, data slates, even architecture, like the scream left fingerprints in space. The Inquisition refers to these as psychic residues. The tech priests use another term, residual harmonics, like music that refuses to fade. Not everyone agrees it should be contained. Some in the Ordo Xenos believe it's an artifact of learning, that it can teach the Imperium to speak with the warp, to shape it, not just resist it. Heresy, but a tempting one. Because whatever the skull is, it isn't quiet. It doesn't grow louder, but it never stops. And deep within it, beneath the layers of shielding, silence, and sacred metal, the Cacodominus is still broadcasting. It should have ended. The target was eliminated, the threat silenced, the warp anomaly resolved. That's what the post-action reports say. That's what the Ordos tell themselves. That's what the Black Templars refuse to discuss. But the howling never stopped. Across scattered subsectors, Vox signals still stutter at precise, repeating intervals, rhythms too clean to be random, too soft to register as transmission. Ships traversing the edge of the silent zones report misaligned navigator impressions. Not visions of demons or storms, but of geometries, patterns, choirs, lightless cathedrals built in their minds, humming with meanings no human mouth can shape. On Ratio Prime, 3,000 pilgrims vanished during a planetary holy procession. The only record left was a single pick capture from an orbital relay, an empty road, a perfect spiral carved into the soil. And the phrase, "We harmonize," painted in blood, 20 meters high. There were no survivors. In the vaults of the Ordo Malleus, a new classification has emerged. Pattern null entities. Phenomena that do not break logic but rewrite it. Events that leave no trail, only influence. Shifts in devotion. Changes in song. Murmurs in isolated garrisons where troops begin humming in unison without knowing why. Every pattern leads back to M34. But not in the way you'd expect. Not in regression, in expansion. This isn't a contagion. It's not spreading. It's resurfacing. The theory, the one buried 6 levels deep in the Sigillite archives, viewable only by inquisitors of the Tricorn Seal, is simple. The Cacodominus didn't die. It didn't scream. It transmitted. That death was never the end. It was the crescendo. A psychic finality folded into a self-sustaining waveform released into the fabric of the warp like a seed. A signal artifact blooming in recursion, waking in places where faith falters and silence grows. Not a god, not a demon, a frequency. And now, more than ever, the Imperium fears what happens if it's heard again. Because it won't need a body. It won't need a voice, just ears.